Hey everyone, I'm Stephen Page, Associate Professor of Saxophone at the University of Texas at Austin, Butler School of Music, coming to you today from Jessen Hall, one of our really amazing performance spaces here on campus. Today, to follow up on my previous video, we're going to talk about reed adjustment. If you haven't watched the previous video, go below, click the link, and check it out. By following this break-in procedure, you might find that a lot of the reed problems you're experiencing will be alleviated and your reeds will play better for longer. Today we're going to cover some really simple procedures. These are things that every saxophonist should be able to do with tools that are easy to come by and probably not risk ruining too many reeds. First, let's talk about materials. There's some simple things that you can purchase that make this process of reed working a lot easier. The first thing is we need a good surface to work on. I recommend several different sizes of glass. The glass provides a really great workspace for what we're about to go over. The second things you'll need are various types of sandpaper. I recommend between 600 and 800 grit, and then maybe 1,000 or 1,200. Another option is to use reed rush. This is actually a plant, and it can be purchased from several music retailers. The important thing with reed rush is if and when you decide to use it, that you soak it first so that it becomes very flexible and will be much easier to work with. The last tool that I would suggest is a sanding block. This is a really simple tool, and it's very easy to make yourself. Check the description below for the dimensions and materials you need to make one. All it is attaching two different strengths of sandpaper to a wood block. This allows some really easy reed adjustments to happen, and it's much safer than using a reed knife. So if you watched the reed break-in video, you know that the goal of that procedure is to create reeds that are consistent and stable. This is what we want to be working with on a day-to-day basis. Nobody likes pulling a reed out of the box and not knowing if it's going to work or not. The other downside of that process in playing a reed instrument in general is that reeds are going to warp. There's no avoiding it. So how can we correct that? The first thing we're going to do is flatten the back side of the reed. This is an easy procedure, one that definitely won't mess up the reed in the long term, and you'll probably find it makes a big impact on how the reed plays. To do this, take your rough sandpaper between 600 and 800 grit, place it on the piece of glass, and then take your reed and lay it flat side down on the sandpaper. Next, move the reed back and forth in a semicircular manner over the sandpaper. You'll notice that I try to avoid the tip going across the paper. It's important during this procedure not to press too hard. I like to put 3 fingers across the reed, one near the tip, one in the center, and one near the back. This allows me to apply even pressure without pushing too hard. Think about trying to let the reed just glide over the paper. This is going to give you the best result. Nice and flat, you're not going to take away too much cane, and we should get exactly what we want. Once you finish flattening the back, take a smaller piece of the same grit sandpaper, between 600 and 800, and rub the vamp very slightly. Ideally, you shouldn't see much cane coming off the reed at this point, but this is going to help smooth that surface down, take off any impurities, and just generally make it a little less rough. Again, stay away from the tip during this procedure. Another great tool for flattening reeds is the Reed Geek. This tool has sort of taken the saxophone and clarinet world by storm and is really versatile. I like to use it especially when I travel because it's so compact. Use this tool to scrape the backside of the reed, being very careful not to get too close to the tip and also not to use much pressure. We don't want to gouge the cane out, again thinking of gliding the tool over the reed. This is going to give you the best result, the most even cut, and hopefully a very flat reed. Those 2 procedures alone should yield some pretty significant results. A warped reed is never going to play very well. So by flattening the back and polishing the front to a certain extent, you should have a reed that's a little bit more vibrant, probably more articulate, and generally just playing better. Remember the reed rush we talked about? You could use that on the vamp of the reed instead of sandpaper. This will give a similar polish, and it's a little easier to work with maybe than a strip of sandpaper. It's merely a matter of preference. Well after the break-in, once I have an idea of what the reed is like, I'll test it for balance. If one side is harder than the other, then I'll use the sanding block to correct that. If you find that the right side of the reed is too hard, you'll hold the reed pointing away from you and use the sanding block to pull back toward your body. To keep it simple, this will effectively make the right side of the reed play softer, taking a little bit of cane away along the rails. The nice thing about the sand block is that it's a very gradual, easy motion, and we're not gouging pieces of cane out like we might with a knife. While a knife is effective, it can also be dangerous because once we take the cane away, we can't put it back. If the left side of the reed is too hard, we'll do the opposite. The reed will point towards you and you'll push the sanding block toward the reed along the left side. The same principle applies here. We're simply taking cane away on the left side of the reed, mostly along the rail. It's a very simple procedure, but very effective. For these procedures, I like to use the more abrasive side of the sanding block. As I said, we would set it up with that 600 or 800 grit paper on one side and the 1000 to 1200 grit paper on the other. Since this is the first procedure in balancing, I'll want that bite of the lower grit sandpaper to make a larger adjustment. After completing the balancing procedure, this is the first time that I might touch the tip of the reed. Again, using that sanding block, I would flip it to the 1000 to 1200 grit side and very carefully slide it over the tip of the reed. Again, as little pressure as possible. We don't need to press against the reed to get the cane to come off, but this is just going to help polish it and take down any little imperfections in the tip. Again, this can make a really big difference in the way a reed plays, so go slowly. Now, all the procedures that I've mentioned with the sanding block can be done also with strips of sandpaper or the reed brush. As a reminder, reed brush has to be wet when you're using it so that it's flexible. You can be more precise using reed brush or the sandpaper. The sanding block makes more general adjustments, which in the initial stages of adjusting is more advantageous. As you get to fine tuning, you'll probably elect to use a tool that allows for a more finely tuned approach. I think that about covers it for the basic procedures you can use at home to try to get your reeds playing their very best. These are some of the very simple things that I do, and honestly, I don't do a whole lot more than this, and my reeds are generally not very problematic. Hopefully you find this to be helpful as well. If you're looking for more information on any of the products that I've talked about, the Reed Geek, Sandpaper, Reed Rush, check out the links below. Hopefully that can help you get started. If you have any questions or you'd like to share what you do, I'd love to hear about it. So leave a comment below and let me know what you think. And for now, while I'm in this beautiful space, I think I'm going to do some practicing. See you next time. Reset the camera.